Thank you, Jesus. I have no idea why he chose that I speak first. I've been in the US for a week, and I'm told that before we came here, it was pretty cold, so we came with the South African sun. But I think a lot more followed me. Last night, when I got to my hotel from a friend's place, I entered with 6 other occupants. And the security guards decided to call me aside and ask me for my pass. And coming from South Africa, anything along those lines is reminiscent of our past. A past that I live half of my life in. In other words, I'm part of a generation that grew up in apartheid South Africa, and I've lived the largest part of my life in post-apartheid South Africa. So for someone with that kind of past, it is easy to attribute everything to racism. And it was only later on when I was in my room that I thought about it. And say, yes, I was the only black person among 6 others. But at the same time, at midnight, there was a young man wearing a baseball hat with a backpack. And this happens not too long after the Boston Marathon. So while the temptation is there to link it to racism, but there are certain facts that we have to take into consideration. And I think when you talk about the legacy of apartheid or racism in South Africa, we tend to assume that there will be an immediate rupture from our past. And our daily lives in South Africa are not exactly like that. If I can share another quick anecdote, I'm from the Eastern Cape, as Deji had indicated. And I went to Joburg in 2002 as a student. And I've been in Joburg now. Well, I live in Pretoria, but Joburg and Pretoria is more or less the same thing. I've been there now for 11 years. And, I went to Joburg knowing that it's a crime-ridden city. But to my disappointment, I've only been robbed just once. And I was robbed by a white man. So, when the case of Oscar Pistorius, for instance, the great athlete who's an inspiration to many South Africans and many people all over the world, came to the fore, there were so many conflicting ideas. On the one hand, we have one white guy, Afrikaner, who killed another white person. And on the other, there is the talk of crime in South Africa. And one of the arguments that were made is that Pistorius had to sleep with a gun under his pillow because of the crime situation in South Africa. For the record, I don't have a gun and I don't intend owning one. So in a nutshell, this is the past that keeps haunting us, and even when things are totally irrelevant, we tend to associate them with the popular view of the country. And now, talking about literature in South Africa. Obviously, with the ushering in of the democratic order, the popular question, which got annoying sometimes, was what would South African writers write about now that the grand theme of apartheid is gone? And we're coming from the past where writers were persecuted, banned, and many of them exiled, especially here in the United States. So now we supposedly had a free country where writers had to explore a variety of themes. And as from 94, actually from the very first, from the inaugural speech of President Mandela, he was ushered in by a poet. And in his speech, he quoted, I think, Ingrid Jonker, a late South African poet. And poetry was part of the politics of South Africa. One of the most quoted speeches by a South African politician, for instance, is I'm an African, by the then Deputy President, Thabo Mbeki. However, it would be vulgarization of poetry if we reduce it to praise singing. We believe that writers and poets in general have a bigger role to play in society. And one of the major controversial moments in our early democracy was the publication of Disgrace by James Coetzee. The book, some of us felt that it seems to push the white compatriots away to say, now that we have a black-dominated government, then there is no place for white people in this country. And to make matters worse, J.M. Coetzee himself expatriated after that. He now lives in Australia. But that created a debate. It is a novel that was discussed in Parliament. The ANC, which is the ruling party in South Africa, submitted a complaint with the Human Rights Commission. And I want us to note that the ANC was not happy about the novel, and it went to be discussed in Parliament. But it was a debate. Disgrace is still circulated all over South Africa, but it was not censored. So now, this takes me further to the worrying trends that we've seen recently. One of the major contributors, satirists in South Africa, is Jonathan Shapiro, otherwise known as Zapiro. He contributes to Sunday Times, which is the widest distributed weekly, Mail and Guardian, another major weekly, and The Times, which is a daily. Zapiro lampoons politicians all the time, and the current president actually is one of his favorite subjects. And the president has sued Zapiro several times, and most of the time withdrawing those charges. And also, there's a young artist, Brett Murray, who decided to paint, who produced a painting that's called The Spear. It was also lampooning the president. And two people, actually one white person, went to that gallery and with a can of paint and defaced that painting. And there was a young black guy who decided to join him in defacing the painting. And we had a security guard who decided whose duty was to prevent that from happening. What he did, he went to the black guy, threw him on the floor, headbutted him and threw him on the floor, and handcuffed him. And then went to talk to the white guy who had actually brought the paint. So that, again, has a lot to do with our past. Hence, I'm saying there can be no immediate rupture from the past. But again, the interesting thing is that as that happened, that young man drove all the way from Limpopo over 3 hours to go to Goodman Gallery to deface that page. Now, at the same time, in Limpopo, his home province, there were thousands of kids who did not get textbooks by the middle of the year. And I think that raises a question about us as the nation in terms of our priorities. But the interesting thing is that at the same time, the labor movement, which is part of the tripartite alliance, in other words, an alliance with the ruling party, threatened to stage a march, a men-only march against the painting. And the unique thing about that march, especially that it was going to be men only, is that they were going to march naked, pledging solidarity with the president, whose genitals were on public display. And again, that raises questions when there is, on the one hand, a situation of young people who cannot access education, and at the same time, a labor movement would be preoccupied with one man's genitals. So these are some of the dynamics of the South Africa that we live in. And as writers, Deji indicated that, for instance, I'm the head of books and publishing in the National Department of Arts and Culture. In simple terms, I'm a civil servant. I work for government. And so one would wonder, how does one express or challenge or even criticize government when I'm essentially part of the problem? And I think this is what part of the democracy that we enjoy in South Africa, that our constitution guarantees free speech, freedom of expression. But at the same time, unfortunately, I am exploiting that. That's why I'm free to write. I don't have to take my work to any censorship board. And as a citizen of South Africa, I'm still in a position to critique the society. So, but now, with the emergence of the Protection of Information Bill, which was adopted by Cabinet last week, there are worrying trends that actually threaten freedom of speech in South Africa. At the moment, yes, the bill has been discussed, has been in the public discourse for the past 3 years, and certain amendments have been made, including to ensure that the whistleblowers, in other words, those who reveal information that relates to corruption, won't be persecuted on the basis of that. So that is good progress. But at the same time, we remain suspicious, especially that at the early stages of the information bill, when we started talking about it, an investigative journalist from the Sunday Times, Mzilikazi Africa, was arrested, and there was heavily armed police arresting one man, and it remained unclear what the charges were against him. But later on, the Commissioner of Police, who is now a former Bheki Cele, went back to apologize, to say, "I'm sorry, I was misled." But in a case where a commissioner of police won't come back and say, "I was misled," in a case where the Protection of Information Bill is used to persecute journalists, writers who may be challenging some of the decisions and actions taken by politicians and civil servants, we do not yet have a clear view of what is happening. So that is part of the worrying trend. So all in all, while we're enjoying our democracy, we must bear in mind that freedom of expression is a human rights issue, and it is a right that we must guard with all our might. Thank you very much.